best since then, especially in the last 2 years, to make the study of fraudulent trigger incidents and false flag operations part of the curriculum of peace studies at that university. Like most people in the peace movement, I understood enough after 9/11 to say the attacks of 9/11 do not justify invasions of countries. I was right to say this, and the peace movement was right to say this. But we missed the second thing we should have said, which is, when it comes to war, we don't trust governments. We don't trust the government's account of 9/11. We aren't satisfied with the chain of faith, and we're going to look into it ourselves. This has been a major failing of the peace movement. And this is one of the reasons the 9/11 Truth movement was even perhaps just a dash rude. And I don't suggest rudeness. I don't think it's usually very helpful. But he did challenge me, and he said, this is important. You must look at it. There's good work on it. You're not doing your homework. And I said, okay, recommend a couple of things and I'll read them. Because you're right, I haven't done my homework. He recommended them, I read them, and of course I watched the official narrative dissolve before my eyes in 2 or 3 days. I want to offer that same challenge to the rest of the peace movement. This is important. How can you claim to understand war if you don't understand the events that trigger it? Barry and Ian stood up and gave us 55 examples of fraudulent events that lead to war and violence. You don't have to memorize the 55, but you got to understand the basics. And if you don't trust governments on war, then for heaven's sakes, look into this. Since 2005, then, I've taken it to be my task to be a civil society researcher and to participate in this amazing, probably historically unprecedented, civil society investigation, of which to which many people have contributed, including many of you in this room today. And I'm honored to be here with you, to be here with Richard, for example, at the back, who's contributed to this, and to all of you. We don't have time to go through the research I've done, but I do want to direct you to a place where you can find it. You just have to Google Journal of 9/11 Studies, open access, free peer-reviewed journal, and you'll find the 4 articles that I've written since 2006, and I'll just tell you what they are. The first one is 118 witnesses. That's where I look at the testimony of over 100 members of the New York Fire Department that they perceived explosions at the time of the collapse of the Twin Towers. Second article is called Waiting for 7, and it looks at the fact that dozens of firefighters knew that Building 7 was coming down long before it came down, sometimes over 4 hours before it came down. This is, of course, virtually impossible according to the official theory, where this was an unprecedented event, the first time in history that a tall building collapsed from fire alone. Third article is called The Missing Jolt, co-written with New Jersey engineer Tony Zambotti, in which we argue, in effect, that the fall of the North Tower, according to NIST, violates the laws of physics. Tony was here yesterday. I'm sorry he had to go home. I want to acknowledge him as one of the bravest and most insightful of your engineers on this issue of 9/11. Thank you, Tony, for all your work. And finally, the last article I wrote is, Did the Earth Shake Before the South Tower Hit the Ground? And there I argue there is strong evidence in the case of all 3 of the buildings that came down that the shaking of the Earth began several seconds before visible collapse, not after. I'm just suggesting that you read the articles carefully, make up your own mind. As far as I'm concerned, the general conclusion is that NIST and the 9/11 Commission are wrong again and again and again, and not just wrong, but deceptive on one crucial matter after another. Friends, and here I mean not just the peace movement, but everybody, this is the worst possible time in history to inflame societies with the spirit of war. This is the worst time to be taken in by fraudulent trigger incidents. It's the most important time to reject the war system, cooperate with the rest of humanity to solve the grave ecological problems we face, which collectively threaten our civilization. As I draw this talk to a conclusion, I want to quote one of the members of the New York Fire Department, Kenneth Rogers, who was a witness on 9/11. We were standing there with about 5 companies, and we were just waiting for our assignment. And then there was an explosion in the South Tower. A lot of guys left at that point. I kept watching. Floor after floor after floor. One floor under another after another. And when it hit about the 5th floor, I figured it was a bomb, because it looked like a synchronized, deliberate kind of thing. And I want to use his testimony as a kind of metaphor here. I want to say to the peace movement, the reason he saw things that others didn't is because he didn't leave the scene, and he didn't turn his head away. He stood there and he looked at it, and that's all I'm asking the peace movement to do. Stop turning your head away. Don't flee the scene. Look at it, please.